Designing and conducting a capital campaign, part of a funding plan for a Northern Utah nonprofit. And so that's one of the reasons why this topic was chosen. We have really outstanding presenters here today in Jerica Mays, Glenn Lanham, also Anna McCutcheon is here.
Wonderful, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. To get things started, we wanted to provide a very broad overview of what is a capital campaign. So, capital campaigns are targeted fundraising efforts that take place over a defined period of time. I think it would be helpful to hear from each of our presenters what capital campaigns you've been involved in. So, just briefly describe what the fundraising goal was for that capital campaign, and if you can also provide how much money you raised. So, my experience has been as the executive director of the Seeger Memorial Clinic. We hit our fundraising goal and we're wrapping up our A Legacy of Healing capital campaign to, we ended up raising just over $3 million to renovate the old family history library in Ogden to be a free medical clinic where we'll provide free medical, dental, vision, mental health, and pharmacy services. I've also been involved with another renovations campaign in Salt Lake, and then I also advised the United Ways capital campaign. Let's go to Anna, and then let's go to Glenn. If you can just describe what projects you've been involved in.
Of course, thank you, Jerica. The one I've had the most time spent in and most investment in, and put forth the most work, I guess, would be the capital campaign that I was able to lead out with an amazing steering committee that included you on it, for the Benkin Nonprofit Learning Campus. And we were able to raise over $1.4 million in just about 9 months. So it was a pretty amazing feat to be a part of. I have been a part of smaller campaigns, actually larger campaigns, but in a very small way through some nonprofits in California I was a part of. And it was not really for renovations, it was just to actually build some wraparound housing, transition housing for unsheltered individuals. So but the majority of my time when it comes to capital campaigns have definitely been on the one at United Way, and it was incredible to watch from start to finish.
Thanks, Anna. Glenn?
Thank you, Jericho. Thanks, Anna. My background is a little bit different on it. Most of my capital campaign experience was back east in the late 80s and early 90s, working for different clients. We would go in and essentially train the board, solicit the board, conduct that early lead gift nucleus phase of the campaign, and then go to another community and launch the same effort. Locally in the Utah market, I was fortunate to work at Utah Opera when I moved here, and we had a $1.5 million capital campaign for a new production studio. Happy to say we raised about 2.2 million. Subsequent to that, up at the University of Utah, probably my proudest effort would be the Fort Douglas area for the Olympic Village back in '02, where we raised just over $17 million for that.
Wonderful, thank you.
And it was a pleasure to be on your campaign committee, of course, too, Jerica, for Seeger.
Yes, Glenn, you were such a wonderful resource for us. I'll forever be grateful to you. And
Thank you.
you know, there's many different capital campaigns, but if you look across the commonalities, they're all justified. It has to be a clear reason why that fundraising effort is needed. There also has to be an urgent need. And really, to run a capital campaign, you have to think about your organization's capacity to carry that from start to finish. Okay, so that's a good broad overview. We'll go to the next slide.
Okay, I guess it's me. I'll share with everybody, this is not necessarily Glenn's verbiage. I'm very fortunate. This is pretty much word for word what I was given 37 years ago when I began in this industry. I believe it's tried and true and proven. And as you can see on the chart, these are the essential elements: proven to be keys to success. You've got to be seen favorably in the community, at least perception-wise, of course. You've got to have a good, positive reputation. The case for support is the most critical document, telling your story, expressing your need, your plan. We'll talk more about that. Leadership, of course, can't be overemphasized in terms of having the right people involved. And not just the right people, but people who are willing and able to really work on the campaign. They're willing and able to give a substantive gift. They're willing and able to approach peers, friends, and colleagues for like gifts. Prospect identification, prospect review is also critical. I was putting this piece with Anna yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about the phrasing, and I asked her to include the word review because I believe it's one thing to identify your prospects, but then the subsequent steps of how much are we going to potentially ask them for? Who are the individuals that are going to be involved in making that request? Be that your board president and your general chair or another key volunteer from your steering committee. That whole process of prospect review subsequent to identification is key. And then the timeline element speaks to the urgency that Jerica just mentioned. One of our old phrases was that everything builds on today, and we used to do timelines actually working backwards from the end. And it just helped you communicate to others and also remind organizationally, internally with staff that if we're going to be at this endpoint down the road, there are some very, very critical steps that we can take each day to get there. Jerica, do you want to start here? I can, either way.
You know, our standards of giving, this concept was introduced to me by Glenn, and it's really helpful. So you want to think of your total fundraising goal and then map it out based on number of gifts. And you really want the majority of the amount raised to come from your top 10. So this was a goal of 3.1 million, and I would say this is very similar to the number of gifts and the amounts we raised at the Seeker Clinic. And it was helpful to have kind of a goal per gift and then to try to then place donors that might be able to give at that capacity. There's different kind of levels, number of gifts. This is fluid, but it can act as a nice benchmark of what you're trying to hit to be successful.
Also, yeah, if I may, again, going back to my early training, the standards of giving chart was a part of every capital campaign effort. It was a part of every feasibility study conducted because this would be shown to interviewees to try to get a sense of where they saw themselves or their foundation or their company. The exact gifts listed here do not need to be exactly matched. It's kind of the roadmap within the roadmap. But if you look at the guidelines up top, you'll see ideally you get a lead gift that is in that 15 to 25% category. If you look at the number column, we have 111124. So that's the top 10, which in this scenario comprised 70% of goal. That top 10 does not have to be 111124. It can be 1234. I've had 11125. It comes out of a little bit of that prospect review process. A couple points, if I may. It's important for the board of your organization to determine over what length of time you are going to solicit these gifts. Jerica, if I'm correct, for you at Seeger, most of these were a one-time.
That's right.
It's more common in my experience that a capital campaign pledge period of 3 years is often seen. That's just, again, just my experience. So if we go to someone for, let's say, that $300,000 gift, the second one listed. Again, the board needs to decide, are we going to approach the potential donor for that all in one shot? Or are we going to ask them to consider $100,000 a year for each of the next 3 years? If you get the commitment, that's immediate leverage at the full level of gift. I believe personally it's very important to do this type of number crunching early on and extensively. We used to have an old saying back in the day, win your campaign on paper first before you go out just soliciting, because it's so critical that you have a thorough plan, that you've crunched your numbers. And one of the best parts of this, and I think Jerica had this happen with her, as you begin to secure the gifts in the top 10, you want to always be sharing that with your leadership, with your board, with your steering committee, because you will see how it builds confidence in the campaign. Another old phrase I remember they gave us was, use the standards of giving chart to show your volunteers how easy it is to reach your goal. Because if you get these top 10 as an example, and it doesn't matter who the entity is on the gift, individual, corporation, foundation, public, private, it's just who's going to do that gift. So just looking to see if there's, after the top 10, you see other gift levels, running the cumulative total. And this chart doesn't even include subsequent, what I call real community-wide participation. Individuals that might give $1,000, that might give $500, but they want to be a part of the winner that they've heard about. They've heard about Seeger. They know what wonderful work the organization does in the community. So it's not reflected on this chart, but there is, that opportunity for anyone and everyone to give at whatever level is most comfortable for them. And I don't know if there are any questions from attendees on this. I'd be happy to address one or two with Jerica, but we could also just go on.
One comment, Glenn, is, and we'll talk about this more, that in a capital campaign, you have a pre-launch phase, a quiet phase, and a public phase. And for me, the standards of giving was really helpful in that during our quiet phase, we were actively fundraising about 80%. Our goal was to have 80% secured before from our top 10 donors before we went public, meaning that we were actively fundraising these smaller gift amounts from volunteers, community partners, smaller individual or foundations. So
I would agree. Absolutely.
yeah, this is a good map to also mark your quiet phase and public phase. My first capital campaign that I was involved in, they didn't have a quiet phase where they were raising the majority of the funds and then a separate public phase. They just went public and said, hey, we need a raise. It was over 3 million again. And so they actively promoted that to everyone involved in the organization. And I think it created, a bit of it was difficult to have the momentum because everyone was involved from the beginning. Whereas if you secure, say, 80% or more, when you announce it to a larger audience, it feels like, oh, we're almost there. Can you help us close the gap?
Correct.
So, yeah, this can be helpful.
And in my background, we always had 50% of goal as a minimum. You never went public before you had half your money committed. Just again, so the first time the general public would hear about the effort, they're seeing, oh, wow, this is the money they're trying to raise, and they've already raised, again, at least half or a little more.
Yeah, it creates good momentum.
That's right.
Chandler, go ahead.
Sorry, I just didn't want to chime in without, yeah, thank you. So wondering especially as you're targeting top investment, these higher investments, at what point, and maybe this is something you'll cover, but at what point are there additional incentives provided? For example, I know that oftentimes if the investors are or those that are donating are companies, there might be an exchange of promotion. There might be foundations or names listed within the area that's being utilized, the company, whatever it is. I guess the incentive is the question. Is that something that's done often in the quiet phase, and how do you kind of determine what to do there?
Jericho, would you like to speak first? I'm happy to.
Sure. I think during the pre-launch quiet phase, you can consider naming opportunities. So for these major donors in our medical facility, some may have the reception desk named after them, or the patient waiting room, or an exam room. And the higher gifts would ideally have more visibility. So people who are coming into that space are seeing their name and they're receiving that recognition. Another great thing to consider is a donor wall where you recognize those donors in a very visible way. And then also you can recognize them if you have a grand opening celebration in the program, perhaps even asking major donors to say a few words during the program. There's lots of ways that you can give them the recognition they really want in the community.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we did have the name gift opportunities piece on our list of things to go over today. That's really, again, from my background, that would be the best piece relative to your question. We actually would try to match name gift opportunities to the standards chart pretty exactly, so that as that potential ask was made, we could at the same time say, should this be something that might be seen favorably, we would like to offer, as Jericho was mentioning, the naming of the lobby or the naming of the conference room or the naming of the facility, whatever that might be. Another key point on the naming recognition that I will share, in addition to the value it has of recognition for the funder, one of the best objectives of those is to help people consider a higher level of giving. That's very sensitive and it's got to be very respectful. But the old phrase is it raises people's sights. And it doesn't have to be naming opportunities just at those great big numbers. I mean, you can envision, you've got maybe smaller offices, what have you, down at the bottom of the chart. Again, it gives individuals who have that type of capacity to still receive a naming opportunity. We have just found that it did in many cases help people consider something a little more than they had not previously been considering. But again, great question. Okay, I'll try to go through my points here kind of quickly. The feasibility study is not always done with a capital campaign, but it is highly regular that one is done. It's important that the board, I think first off, you have to determine, are we going to do this in-house or are we going to do it with an outside counsel? If you do outside counsel, there's a substantive fee sometimes included with that. If you do it in-house, it's a significant amount of time and commitment and resources to schedule all those interviews and make it happen. So that's kind of the first thing for me with the study is how are we going to conduct it, internal or outternal? The board consensus is important in that, and I almost could say Jericho would probably speak to this and Anna too. Ultimately, the success of the campaign comes down to your board. It's just the board and your committee, but it's board first, and we'll talk more about that. The board has to be agreed on this is what we want to do. This is how we're moving forward. This is the message that we're going to give to the community. Because if you have any disagreement among your own internal family, so to speak, you can't be launching a campaign. You've got to be on the same page as a group. It's also very important that whatever the feasibility comes back with, whatever that recommendation is, that the board is willing to listen to it. Not every feasibility comes back and says, yeah, great, have a campaign. I've had experience where the feasibility study came back and they were very clear that this organization should not have a campaign at the present time. In this particular case, it was a private school that was carrying a lot of debt, seven-figure debt. And the community leadership said, until they pay their debt off, don't come to me asking for money. I'm going to give it to an organization that's more fiscally sound. So I just share that, and the board needs to be willing to accept the recommendation of the study. Studies also are great, and I like this word, uncover, because they will help you uncover potential leadership, and they will help you uncover prospective top donors. Just in the course of those interviews, you will hear names, foundation names, corporate names, individual names that might not even be on your list. And especially if multiple interviewees mention someone or an entity, 3, 4, 5 times, and that name being mentioned wasn't on your original interview list, you want to do all you can to try to interview that person who's being spoken of, because others in the community obviously feel they should potentially participate. It's just one of the great, sometimes surprising pieces of the study. The case for support is your primary statement of need, as we mentioned earlier. I mean, the major goal of the case is to convince potential contributors they're investing in an outstanding cause. That's kind of the bottom line. People are most impacted by what impacts people's lives. So your case needs to not only share your history and your background, but it's also got to clearly state the need. Going back to Jericho's early comments, it's got to convey that urgency that moving forward with this effort is justified, that it's needed, that it's important. Budget wise,
Oh, Glenn, just one thought on the
yeah,
case for support. This is a great time to engage in storytelling, to
absolutely.
really tell your story, why it's needed, and make it, an emotional appeal to potential donors.
That's a great point. Thank you. You actually want to appeal to emotion first. That's often a stronger beginning than maybe something that's a little drier. As far as the budget piece, for me, we talked about this. Pretty traditional with all capital campaigns, and you'll need to have this conversation with your board because they're the first group to be solicited. The capital campaign gifts are 99 times out of 100. They are above and beyond your annual fund donor gifts. So this does not replace an annual fund gift. This does not take the place of that. This has to be above and beyond what your annual donors are already giving. So that's a conversation that needs to be had. Again, it starts with the board. Board members will be asked for capital campaign gifts in addition to what they give annually. That's just a fundamental one I've found. And then the mentorship piece for me really is reaching out to colleagues with experience, engaging others that you know in the community and that you have a relationship with who perhaps have had capital campaign experience, get them on a committee, perhaps the steering committee, perhaps that prospect identification process. Just involve them, reach out to them for support, for ideas to bounce something off the wall with. But this pre-launch phase is so critical because the effort is big. I can't overemphasize how important the early stages are.
Looks like we have a question from Chandler.
Sorry to be chatty. I'm curious the differences actually. So capital campaign, you said it sounds like it's more focused on a particular not non operational based effort. However, I'm curious if about our capital campaigns often pursued when in the initial creation of a nonprofit in order to generate the initial funding needed to produce the actual, get the organization running?
I mean, in my background, it's usually, it's for a new building, it's for a new facility, it's for enhancements to the YMCA gymnasium, it's for the new nursing home. It's some sort of capital undertaking, bricks and mortar. I mean, it depends on the history of the organization, how long the organization has been around. I mean, do they need a new building to conduct their mission? I don't know. That's the board's call. So that's for me where I'm coming from on that.
I'm just trying to delineate the difference between general, I guess, general fundraising to, get the organization running. And I understand this is more event based or focused, but I feel like getting an organization started is sort of similar, but I don't know if they're where the differences or the similarities are.
From my experience, I've seen capital campaigns primarily be for a large fundraising goal for some type of renovation or construction project. I haven't seen one personally for operations, but perhaps that's something that is done elsewhere. Glenn, I just wanted to make a note about mentorship. I just can't speak enough to this. There are third-party consultants. I've heard other nonprofits in Northern Utah have a great experience with the Pathway Group in Salt Lake. And there's others. For the Seeger Clinic, like we really relied on just networking with people in the community who had prior experience. Glenn was really instrumental for me and our project's success, but we also reached out to fundraising experts from Intermountain Health and others. And, as we reached out and asked for help, so many were just willing to meet with me one-on-one, and I'd run, our case statement past them or bounce ideas about our donor prospect list. You'll be surprised that if you ask for help, people are generally very willing to offer advice.
I just want to add something to the answer for Chandler's question a little bit, just add a little bit of clarification when it comes to like when do you kind of start one maybe or for what? Due to the requirements, well, not requirements, due to the strong suggestions of for this pre-launch phase, like a feasibility study, board consensus, also case for support. Most of the time, brand new nonprofits or those that want to get started don't have the capacity or don't already have a feasibility study done. And so it's much harder to get the capital campaign off the ground. But these things really springboard the capital campaign effort. So although I've never seen one, like a capital campaign done to start a nonprofit or raise money for that inception of that cause, that passion, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would definitely say that these pre-launch strongly suggested requirements, they really help that. And so using a nonprofit doesn't have to have a feasibility study to like even begin. So, but it does definitely help with the capital campaign itself. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you, Anna. That's good. Chandler, the other thing I was going to add, there have been a few instances you can take like the standards chart and you can apply it to an annual fund. I mean, I've had success where we just kind of tried to ramp up annual giving using a little bit of that pyramid of gifts model. So Anna's point is very well made about capacity in the early stages of nonprofit existence, so to speak. They likely would not have those resources.
Okay, our next phase is called the quiet, or our first phase maybe, 1A is called the quiet phase and on our little roadmap. So you have a favorable public image, your board is gung-ho, you have your cases for support drawn up, you're feeling really good about the stories and the appeal to some private entities. That's kind of the focus here. So I will not spend a lot of time on the steering committee because it's somewhat self-explanatory, I feel, but you might have heard that this is just a campaign committee or just a like even a board committee or an adjunct committee too. There's some names that you might have heard about this already. I used to just think it was kind of political. Like I only heard this in like the political realm, steering committee, but it's just a group of people, a group of well-connected people is the goal that will help you from beginning to end, help you accomplish this campaign, who are on board, who are committed, and who want to see this through with you. There's usually a chair and vice chair, not always, but most of the time. And they do the agenda, they assign tasks, they follow up. They're kind of that person, usually a fundraiser or maybe executive director. I personally was in charge of ours. I'm the development director. I know that Jerica was in charge of hers, and she's the ED. So this is a group of committed individuals, some staff, some board, some external partners who are committed to this. And I would say there's not necessarily maybe a minimum of people you would have. I'm sure that Glenn could speak to that more with his experience, but I definitely wouldn't probably go over a dozen. It's a lot of voices.
Okay.
And we had like 10 to 12 like on ours. And I just want to kind of three suggested I guess profiles for these people that are on your committee. I would strongly suggest that you kind of invite them personally. Not if they're willing to be on here, maybe interview them a little bit. They really need to be committed to this and be loyal to your nonprofit in general and your commitment. So believe in your cause and see it through. Experience is amazing if they come with previous experience, but not required, of course. But it is very helpful. And also well-connected individuals. Do they know donors? Do they know private foundations? Do they know some of these parties, or at least other people who are well-connected, who have those names and numbers, and maybe even a personal warm handoff? Find out what they're willing to do and how to help you. So I didn't want to like labor on that, but it's kind of self-explanatory. And Glenn, do you want to add anything to the amount of people, or who would you
Yeah,
suggest?
I would not go over 12. I think 10 was often a number it depends.
It does.
The name is flexible. I had not thought of this before today, but we also sometimes called it the campaign cabinet. That was just, something different.
That is also what we call ours. So
And
yeah.
it kept that campaign name always kind of in the forefront. No, I think what you said, yeah, I have nothing else to add right now.
Awesome. Okay, so that's kind of if there's any questions on that, we're happy to take them, but it's kind of simple, just kind of a simple, that's the first phase though. That's the first part of the quiet phase. And then the second thing here, before I let Glenn take the floor on this particular and deep dive more into it, I just want to share when it comes to prospecting new donors and identifying them, doing the research and reviewing, I just kind of want to share actually an example, a study that was actually done several decades ago, but it really applies to giving, it applies to capital campaigns specifically, but also just giving in general from a donor. So there was this study done by Everett Brogers, and it's called the diffusion of innovation theory. And the theory is that you're going to have early adopters and then late adopters and also like never adopters. And so just as you enter this prospecting donor phase, within this quiet phase, as you're entering this task, it's okay if donors say no, if they're not quite ready, if they don't jump on right away. It's all healthy, it's all good, it's all community focused. So like the example that this research study gave was about the iPhone and how when like Apple iPhone came out, there were those early adopters and they waited in line overnight to buy that phone, to get it in their hand. They couldn't wait. They want to jump on board. And then there was like the late adopters and okay, I'll get one. Everyone else has one. My friends have one. I'll join. And then there's the never adopters like me, and I will never have an iPhone. And I will never buy one. So it's okay if like you're going to have those early adopters in your capital campaign. and they're going to jump on. They're going to be so excited. They're going to ask how they can help, how they can give, what do they need help with. Like, they'll be so excited. And you want to utilize those gifts and talents in people. And then you're going to have those late givers, and that's awesome too. They'll come in a little bit later with some influence and maybe jump on board at the end. And then there's some donors who just don't align, don't have the same passion, just maybe give to other places, and they say no. And that's also very much okay. So just as we go into this prospecting donors, identification and review with Glenn a little bit more, just keep that in mind that lots of people say yes, some people say yes later, some people won't. I hope that makes sense, but it's called the diffusion of innovation theory. So just look that up if you want to later on. But it's all part of the cycle. Let's see, Glenn and Jerica, if you guys want to just like take it from here when it comes to prospecting and then the standards of giving, you want to go over that a little bit more. I know we went over that. And then we can all kind of jump in with the legislative ask.
Why don't you touch on donor identification and review, Glenn? And then I think we covered the standards of giving pretty well. So then I can jump into the legislative ask.
So if everyone will bear with me again, this is very old school. This is again in that tried and true box. I'm just looking at a couple of the notes. If folks are willing, you go to your board, you go to some of your top leadership, and this is just an example of what has been done. I'm not saying this is what you have to do. It's always going to vary. But we would establish what was called the Prospect Review Committee. And that was usually only 3, 4, 5 people. It was a highly confidential group. No one knew who was on the Prospect Review Committee. If anybody asked, we would just say, it's a group of your peers, community leaders. And the role of that committee at the meetings, sitting with the standards of giving chart in front of them, was to try to match potential prospects to the chart. Who are we going to approach for the top gift? Who are we going to approach for these gifts in the top 10? And again, I go back to critical to have already predetermined, is this a 1-year ask? Is this a 3-year pledge? That's very important. The reason we went through that process is because the philosophy of approach was this. It's how much could someone give if they're sufficiently motivated and they're asked by the right person or persons. That was the number one goal. Okay, we're going to come up with a good number. It's not insulting, but it's a stretch ask. It's above and beyond their annual gift. And the board president and the CEO are going to make the ask. Or the board president and the board vice. That was for every prospect. So that's really, I just wanted to speak to that today. You could do a whole presentation on prospect review and standards. So I hope that's helpful. It's a delicate process, but it will help you come up with good ask amounts. I mean, there's an old fundraising saying, if you get a third of every dollar you ask for, that's pretty good. I think Jerica's Seeger effort and a few others we were engaged in, we were seeing 70 to 80% of ask, which is really good. And we believed that was due to the early prospect review work we had done weeks and months before that. So.
Well, and I want to emphasize like the importance of the right person making the ask.
Absolutely.
In our campaign, we actually had a philanthropist participate on our steering committee who was willing to branch into his social network and make introductions and even make asks. And so if you can find, that person who's very connected and willing to tap into their personal relationships, that goes a long way because it's very different when that individual asked versus myself as the executive director.
Jerica, you just share, I mean, that's like that's the number one goal for anybody involved in your steering committee. I mean, ideally, it would be just what you said. It's not just someone who loves Seeger. It's someone who's willing to go to their friends and colleagues and make an ask on your behalf. That's,
Totally.
I mean, if you get that, you're going to have success,
Yes.
as you saw and yeah.
Um,
And we haven't said this yet. I think everybody knows it, but it's a good opportunity to share it. All of those types of requests or solicitations that we're talking about, no one can go make that request unless he or she or their foundation or company has already made their own commitment. That has to precede the solicitation because they're not going to be effective because they haven't made their own gift. And if the prospect says, well, what's your gift? And they go, well, we haven't given yet, or we don't know. No.
yeah, yeah, like you want to think of your board, your steering committee, those that are closest to the campaign as your family.
That's right.
Really, your family should be giving. They should be stretching to support that, not just with their time, but
Uh-huh.
also financial commitment. And that says a lot to the donors, potential donor prospects. They want to see that you've got some skin in the game.
That's right. And segueing from that, every board member's individual gift is, of course, confidential, but it's important that your aggregate number for your board, and that can include a personal gift as well as a associated foundation. When you go out to solicit the top 10, pretty common question right off the bat is going to be how much is your board giving to this? And when you share that aggregate number, it needs to be a number that people will go, okay, yeah, they're behind it. As opposed to, gee, I thought given who's on your board, that would be a little more. Again, very sensitive, very delicate, but it's important that the board recognize how their combined giving, how important that is starting off.
Love it, Glenn. Okay. The legislative ask. I actually like going into this, I didn't know that there was appropriation funding available through the legislature. It was actually through a conversation with some leaders at United Way of Northern Utah when they learned about the project that said, hey, you should consider a legislative ask. And I think it's something all nonprofits should know is available. So the process of going about that for us was first, there are priorities set for Northern Utah of what legislative asks are most important for our community. And those are set by the Northern Utah Chamber Coalition. It's a arm of the Ogden Weber Chamber of Commerce. So if you're interested in a legislative ask, you should really connect with them. I believe they meet quarterly and perhaps more frequently as they approach the legislative session. But you'd want to definitely have a conversation with them, share your vision for your campaign, and see if it might align and they might be willing to make your project a priority. Then from there, you want to connect with either your senator or representative because you need one individual who is willing to really champion your request. In our case, we worked closely with Representative Rosemary Lesser, and she helped us guide the process. She was just wonderful. We completed, there's a request for appropriations form. Also, you'll be required to outline your budget and set an amount that you're requesting. For us, our request was $750,000. And then once you submit your request, you kind of think like you'll submit it and then you'll just wait and hear back. But there's a lot of legwork that happens after you submit it. It's not enough just to submit it. You really want to meet with as many people as possible on that appropriations committee. And so I spent hours like setting up Zoom calls, meeting in person at the Capitol with those on the appropriation committee, both senators and representatives, telling them about the project, why it was important, and asking for their vote to make our project a priority. And I think that's what really makes the magic happen is you need people in power to believe in what you're doing because they get so many requests and then they rank them and only the highest ones are actually funded. So one thing I'd recommend is also identifying who the executive committee is for the appropriations committee and trying to meet in person with them. You do give a 3-minute presentation, but my perspective is it's those one-on-one conversations that really push your project forward. So just know that funding is available. And for our campaign, we received, we were awarded the full $750,000 right at the beginning of our capital campaign, which actually created such great momentum as we went to we made major requests because we already had secured a large portion of our goal. So yeah, if you have any questions about connecting with the Northern Utah Chamber Coalition or navigating an appropriations request, we're happy to provide additional insights. So thank you. Back to Anna.
Thank you so much, Glenn and Jerica, for reviewing prospect identification and the legislative ask. I will add to Jerica's point that it was our third time in 2024, I guess, going to the legislature with the same amount, I believe, actually, 750,000. It was either 700 or 750, all the numbers, going to them for an ask. That was our third year. And apparently the first 2 years, we just did not have enough voice, enough bodies contributing to the conversation and making sure that we were front and center, more and more and more, that they saw us every day and did not forget us. So that third year, to Jerica's point, it takes time, it takes commitment. You need more than just yourself. Volunteers are very helpful. We definitely had more staff. We had more board members. We definitely had more steering committee members help us with this particular effort. So to Jerica's point, it definitely is a necessary, I don't know, not evil. It's not necessarily evil, but it's definitely a necessary effort. But it does take a lot of time. So just, get good sleep and drink a Red Bull. Just kidding. Okay, our timelines. This is just here because that is something you need to keep in mind throughout each of these phases, throughout the entire campaign. A timeline is very like when you want to have your first 10 donors asked by, when each month your committee members want to know when we're meeting and how often. So keep these things very regimented, keep some consistency with this timeline. It'll be very helpful to yourself and to your committee, and also just to the public as it goes more mainstream. Just to also highlight, we call this the quiet phase, but it's not, as Sarah's not here, but she would say if she were here, that we're not trying to keep the campaign a secret, but we're just not broadcasting it quite yet to the masses. It does help when there is momentum. It does help when you have at least 50% to 80% of that fundraising goal already met. So keep your timeline. Usually they are, I think Glenn referred to this, like 2 to 3 years. The ones I have been a part of before this one, even though they were smaller, it was also, they were larger campaigns, usually 3 to 5 million. They were definitely at minimum 3 years. Ours, we didn't exactly have a timeline, but we knew that a lot depended on the legislative ask. And we also knew how many donors we did want to ask before that. So it definitely, our timeline grew morphed a little bit, but we kind of had some dates in mind. So if everyone's on that same target line, it definitely helps the momentum move forward.
Okay, the public phase. So this is where you've already secured a large portion of your fundraising goal, and now you're announcing it broadly to your supporters and the public. So we're going to tag team this together, Glenn and Anna. Marketing materials.
A lot of the, if I might add really quick, a lot of these marketing materials will come naturally. They will just springboard from your cases for support, your stories, the reason why you're even starting a capital campaign. So as long as you have some good graphic design skills, these will not be hard to create.
For us, we put together a letter that went broadly to all of our volunteers at this phase to invite them to consider making a gift.
And in my background, we would, if the client or the nonprofit organization had the funding to do so, and it's important that you don't want to look like you're overspending, but the case for support we just made a professionally produced brochure. Just took that same copy from the case, because in the feasibility study and maybe the early part, your board doesn't need a brochure that's published. They just need to see it on white paper. But ultimately, you're going to have your, like you, Jerica, you had your renderings, you had some of the floor plan, a little bit of what you're all about, and that just having that produced economically can often be a nice piece of this public phase.
Yeah, during the public phase too, we actually invited our volunteers, community partners, government officials to an open house where they could see the space, they could learn about the project. We had a bunch of like posters that were a bit larger on easels with renderings, with showing the impact of this project. So, you can get creative and how you get the word out in the community.
We also did renderings and schematics for our learning campus of what it would look like and set them up along like the walls of our now renovated space downstairs of what it would look like and where it would be implemented. And yes, it was a very magical moment. Like every tour was pretty magical to see what they would be investing in.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add one thing we're doing in family counseling, and I think every organization, I mean, Jerica, you just spoke to it, but when we go public or when we speak of community involvement, we really try to remember our public and city government officials. It's not just the state legislature, but we invite Ogden City, the mayor, various elements of all of those pieces. Those individuals are always invited to our open houses, to our events. That just popped in my head and I thought it was worth sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Maybe this is even a time where you get some media coverage about your campaign and how people can get involved. During this phase, we also had a dedicated web page to the campaign where the public could go, and we even had a thermometer showing how close we were to our goal. So just something to consider.
Yeah, we would do press releases. Again, if it's the first time the general community's hearing about it, I mean, we would try to get TV there, interviewing members of the steering committee. We would try to get a good press release so that it would be front page of a newspaper section the same week it's on the TV. Celebrate early success is fun to do. We need to remember to do that. We all kind of tell ourselves sometimes we have to step back and just celebrate what we're doing. Jerica, I mean, I'll tell everyone, Jerica's campaign and the way she ran it, her focus on her top 10 was just outstanding. I mean, it's truly one of the best I've ever seen. And I think the success speaks to that. The community wants to be a part of what Seeger is doing and will do. It was just done so well.
Well, it's so fun. Like, you start out and you make a plan, you map out your standards of giving, your donor prospects, and then you make the asks. And as you see success, it's very fun to announce that to your steering committee, to your board, to show that you're moving forward. And so I like that point of pausing to celebrate, because there's if you're doing it right, you'll see wins along your road map.
I just thought of two thoughts if I could. This goes back to standards of giving, but Jerica and I have both done this. We would just put little blocks or little boxes uh, next to the chart or corresponding empty boxes. But then as you got the gift, you put a big X in it, put it on the wall, let the staff see, hey, we got this one. Hey, we got another one. Show that to the committee, because they'll be excited too. We haven't mentioned this today, and I just feel led to share it. But I would recommend and suggest that if you're going to do the campaign, all these pieces we've talked about, that you have multiple campaign goals. And your first goal is one that the cabinet or the steering committee, the board, I mean, it's a bigger number than you've done, but it's also a number that everybody feels really good and says, we can hit that number. And then kind of to yourselves, you maybe have another little goal. And then above and beyond that, you have your stretch goal. And that's just because you want to ensure success. That's why we would do this. We would set that first number. Some people would say, no, that's too low. And it's like, well, but it ensures when we go public and when the community hears about this thing. I mean, the worst thing to do is set a $5 million goal and raise $4.8 million. You want to set a $4 million goal and raise 4.5. That's my 2 cents on that piece. That hadn't been shared yet today. I mean, I think Jerica's campaign when we started was a little bit, Jerica, wasn't your original goal 2.5?
Yeah, it was 2.5, and you were the one, Glenn, that said you should consider a stretch goal. And 3 million was our stretch, and we surpassed it. So,
And the reason I did that was because of how well you did on your top 10.
mhm.
You had already secured such a significant amount of the 2.5 goal before you had even gone to the general community.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just, based on experience, when you do go public and people see how much you've already raised, they're going to want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And I think we end up around 3.1 or 3.2 ultimately.
That's a good point, Glenn. Thank you.
So you're welcome, of course.
All right, Anna, Glenn.
You guys just take a moment, look at these little cheerleaders with pom-poms, because this is such a fun time. The grand opening celebration, it was, and then your donor stewardship and thanking donors definitely cannot go underrated. The press release and public announcements, they all kind of wrap up into one big, we had to put both words here, wrap up and celebration, both phrases. But you have definitely are getting those last gifts in. If you've written several grants, I know that like YCC, they did their capital campaign and they surpassed their goal as well. But they were writing grants and asking donors, not really seeing yet the outcome. But they kept asking, people. Some came in, but they had a lot come in almost when they were like, should we wrap up? Should we continue? And they kept asking people, and so then all the asks kind of like came in near the end, and so they definitely surpassed their goal, but they weren't like counting on it. They weren't assuming they would get it. So just keep asking, and you'll definitely surpass your goal, I'm sure. But the grand opening, make it a big day, make it a special day. It's rewarding so much. Blood, sweat, and tears have gone into a capital campaign, and so it's worth every minute that you can celebrate it. Your people who have given want to be a part of it. Donors want to be a part. Volunteers want to be a part of it. So just make everyone a priority. Make sure that you are honoring their presence and their gift appropriately by your standards of giving, but also just by your gift policy that you have. Our marketing director sent out a press release many weeks in advance, making sure that we knew who we wanted to be there, and we wanted as many people as can make that timing available to come as well. So just give it enough time. Make sure that everyone who needs to know knows as early as possible. It will undoubtedly occur where you are doing things possibly the night before or morning of, making sure things are just spick and span, but that's okay. Also, it's necessary to make sure that everyone is on your steering committee and on your board, as Glenn has mentioned a few times, that they are able to participate. They're able to be there. They're able to show up. So we were just speaking to one of our board members recently, and he said, if there's some things coming open next year, my calendar is already booked through like June. So could you please send these calendar invites as soon as possible? And that is we just keep that in mind. Not everyone's calendar is the same. So just on a logistic level, just keep that date in mind. We had to move our date personally at United Way. We had to move it once. I had already told most of our high level tier donors of a date in February, and that had to be moved. And I had just sent this notification to them, like a personal invitation. And so I had to reach out to all of them again and move that date. And they were very okay with that transparency. So just some personal notes on that. But it's time to celebrate, wrap things up, make sure you thank your donors. They invested, as Glenn said, above and beyond their normal gift, their normal annual gift, or even their monthly gift, maybe. But this was, they believed in you and they believed in your passion and they believed in this particular effort. So just make it a priority and don't let anyone fall through the cracks. It will take some work, but it'll be well worth it. And those donors will probably, in our experience anyway, those donors will most likely become yearly supporters of yours.
Anna, if I can interject, I think that, like, honestly, no one shows appreciation and thanks donors better than Anna. I loved at your grand opening celebration. I was there and it was just such a beautiful event, so well thought out. And I was so surprised at the end. Well, maybe a week or so later, I received in the mail from Anna just a thank you card for attending with a photo of me at the event. And it was just a nice personal touch and made me feel really appreciated. So, anything you can do to show that you really see the people that came and appreciated their support goes a long way. And Anna, you do such a great job at that.
That's really sweet of you. Thank you, Jerka. Thanking donors is my favorite thing to do in my job, but it pays off, and I get, I think, a bigger high out of it than even the donors probably reading the note. But it's critical. It is critical. And Glenn will not speak. He will speak more to this. Thanking donors is like one of the.
Oh, I mean,
think,
you guys have both just hit it on the, hit the nail on the head. We did the exact same thing. Subsequent to your grand opening and your big party, send everybody, I mean, again, based on resources, we would do a particular count, our board members, steering committee, maybe some of those early top donors, uh, handwritten thank you notes, especially in the age of technology. But here's what I would suggest is don't necessarily feel that the staff has to send all the thank you letters. Have your board write. We still do this. I'll give board members 3 donor names and 3 addresses and 3 note cards and say, would you please just write this donor a thank you?
yes, exactly.
And it's coming from the board member, or it comes from a member of the steering committee. And that we found was also important. No, thanking is key. We used to say that how you thank and acknowledge is all part of the next ask, because people very much remember how you thank,
how they were thanked,
how they were thanked. And it's important if, they don't want to feel that you overdid it. Those are sometimes rare instances. Maybe someone's gift is more modest comparatively. We've all heard those stories. I think you said it earlier, Anna. It's important to provide appropriate recognition for level of gift. But you can't say thank you too much either. So
everything in moderation. Just on I think a last note for this little wrap up. I have a friend. This is just, I guess, a rule of thumb in general when it comes to thanking donors. But I have a friend. She calls herself the thanker in chief. She's the chief advancement officer of a nonprofit in Tennessee, and she shared this with me a while ago, and I have never forgot it. But she goes, view your donors like a bank account. So if you are always making withdrawals and always asking for monetary contributions, that bank account is going to run dry quickly and they will be empty for you. But if you do make deposits and you do say thank you more often than you withdraw, you will have very happy donors and they will definitely say yes to you much more often than no. So just keep that in mind. Just say thank you. It's a handwritten card goes a much longer way than you might realize.
That's
Yes,
a beautiful metaphor. I love that,
I
Anna.
do too. I do too.
There's a question in the chat box.
Oh,
How
there it
many
is. It's in
staff
line.
members are usually required to pull off a
There we go.
successful capital campaign from Summer Williams? Glenn, Jerica, do you want to add to how many you think? There's definitely a difference when it comes to
I'm
staff
sorry, how
here.
many staff? Oh gosh. I mean, it's going to vary based on how much money you're trying to raise. And again, are you talking about a 1 year or a 3 year pledge period? You know, are you doing your feasibility study internally, or are you paying to have an outside firm come in and do it? It's
Mm-hmm.
there's not necessarily a definitive, well, you need 4 people or you need. I would suggest that's a discussion, maybe with the ED or the CEO and your board, and you start with, what's our campaign budget? How much money do we have right now in our coffers to support a capital campaign in terms of staff, salary, payroll, resources, printed material, etc.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
son.
Hi, Glenn. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question because I have been listening and I hear a lot, CEO, CFO, board members, marketing directors, et cetera, and so forth. And I just wanted to pose the question because, some nonprofits, I'm not sure about the others in Weber County, but at least this one is very limited in staff. And
Right,
so
right.
it seems like a very large undertaking, which would be so helpful, I'm sure, to the nonprofit and to the community at large. But that's why I posed the question, just because
Oh,
it seems like almost an insurmountable
yeah.
thing to do when you're dealing with very limited staff. So, yeah.
I mean, to your point, any campaign is, yes, it's a big undertaking.
If I could just jump in, I wonder if we could repose that question and say, how does a small nonprofit with limited resources pull off a capital campaign, knowing that the scope is not going to be that of a $1 million a year a nonprofit, but how does a really small nonprofit with limited resources scale and pull off a campaign like that? And I know that's a big answer, but is there a kind of a summary of that? Any thoughts on that?
I would love to speak to that. So Summer at the Seeger Clinic, I mean, we just have two part-time staff members, myself and a clinic manager, and the rest are volunteers. So taking on a large capital campaign was something we hadn't personally done. I definitely believe a small nonprofit can do it, but you need a firm commitment from, of course, the board of directors. And also, I would say either the executive director or a key staff member who is going to dedicate a considerable amount of their working time to overseeing this. You really need one person who's taking ownership from beginning to end, in my opinion. And I think that steering committee is really the magic sauce because one person can't do it. It takes a collective effort with many people committed to the success of the campaign. You might have one staff person really being the champion, but you need a strong steering committee to see it through.
So a lot of administrative and board support it sounds like the secret sauce to success, pretty much.
Yeah, and then having a steering committee with people of influence,
Sure.
who are willing to go to
Yeah.
their networks.
And if I could add, Summer, I mean, it's both. It is that administrative piece, in addition to the committee in terms of people of influence willing to ask others. I'm trying to think of the easiest way to say this. On our side, on the nonprofit side, you want to always bear in mind that the steering committee, these are individuals in the community who have attached their name to this effort. You've got your chairperson, that
Right.
they don't want a loser. They want this thing to succeed because everyone in town, especially when you go public and you're trying to raise the last third of your money, they all know at that point, oh, so and so's involved and so and so's involved. So that's kind of just it can be leveraged later because I can assure you that the steering committee because their names are attached to this and people in the community know they're involved, they will sometimes call special meetings at the end of a campaign. And I've been in those meetings where the general chairman said, we have a meeting and the meeting's not over until we've determined how we're reaching goal, because leadership was not going to have a loser.
One more question in chat.
Is he asking about a $20,000 or a $50,000 capital campaign goal?
This is just me piling on to what was asked by Summer, which is that, you know, smaller, I presume that we would be under the same structure. I mean, everything would apply even if someone
Yeah,
had for
that's
small.
correct. I mean, Chandler, we had one capital campaign where our goal was $900,000. And we just proportionately adjusted the standards chart. So that the top 10, ideally, we got maybe 500,000 total. So the top gift was maybe one gift at a, yeah, same philosophy.
Great. Well, awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for attending
Thank you, Mark.
today. So really appreciate those who attended today for the really thoughtful questions.